All right. Picking up where we left off last week, we're going to talk about Matthew chapter 20, parable of the workers in the vineyard. What was the story here? Workers in the vineyard. What's the story?
The guys that worked different times and got paid the same.
The guys that all worked at different times and got paid the same, right? And so, in this story, there's the group of guys that came to work first thing in the morning. What was the arrangement that they made with the landowner?
We will work for you all day and we'll get a denarius.
Work all day for a denarius, okay? So, they agreed to work how long?
A day.
All day. For how much money?
A denarius.
1 denarius. So that was the arrangement. Did they work all day?
Yes.
Did they receive a denarius?
Yes.
Was everything as it was agreed upon?
Yes.
So, the second, third, fourth groups that were all picked, they worked less time, right? He went back basically every 3 hours all day long. The last group only worked 1 hour. What did he make? What arrangement did he make with them?
Us do as I see fit.
Yeah, so you come work for me for the rest of the day, and I'll pay you what is right. Okay? So they all went and worked. One interesting thing about those guys when they're approached in the marketplace is when he asks them, why are you not working? They say, because no one has asked us to. Right? So it's not that they're unwilling to work, they've just not had the opportunity. When given the opportunity, they go. When it comes time to pay them, he pays them what?
A denarius.
A denarius. Now, what did he agree to pay them? What was right. That's vague, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right? How long did they agree to work?
The rest of the day.
The rest of the day. Did all of them work the rest of the day? Yeah. So you worked the rest of the day, and it was a different amount of time for everybody, and I'll give you whatever's right. So a contract was made, worked the rest of the day, and I'll give you something. And was the contract delivered on?
Yes.
So everybody that worked in the vineyard was given what they were told they would be given, right?
Yeah.
Just some of them were more specific than others. The first group agreed to work for a certain amount. Everybody else worked for, quote unquote, what was right. Who determines what's right?
The guy giving the money.
The guy with the money, right? And we're going to see that here, okay? Now, if the first group had said, no, we want a denarius and a half, maybe that's a negotiation. I don't know. But here's what happens in this story. Verse 12, the group that came first, that agreed to work for a denarius for a whole day's work and got exactly what they were offered for exactly what they did, say, these last men have worked only 1 hour. You have made them equal to us who have borne the burden and the heat of the day. But he answered one of them and said, friend, I am doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for a denarius? I gave you everything I told you I would give you. Take what is yours and go your way. Now there's something else here. Take what is yours. What is he telling them is theirs?
The money.
The money. Which money?
The denarius.
The denarius. The money they earned. You earned it. Now it's yours. Take what's yours and go. Okay? That's important because take what is yours and go your way. I wish to give this last man the same as you. Now, he said something else. I wish to give. Did the last guy agree to work for a denarius?
No.
No. He agreed to work for what was right. Who gets to determine what was right? The guy with the money. So he says, this guy came and he took my word that I would pay him what's right. And I decided this is what's right. That's up to me. I gave you exactly what you asked for. I gave him exactly what I promised. The fact that they're the same thing is entirely up to me. I've given him, and he says give, which is what the important thing here, okay? Is it not lawful for me to do what I wish with my own things? What is he saying there?
It's not yours. It's mine.
Everything else besides what you have earned belongs to me. My land, my crops, my money. I will do what is right, or what I believe is right, with my things. There's something that's spoken of here, and I understand that this is a parable. It's describing God and the way God chooses to give away salvation, the way God chooses to give away grace, the way God shows mercy. Yes, I get that. But there's also the concept here, there's a reason that most of the parables, not all of them, but most of them have to do with money. Is because people understand money. I earned that, it belongs to me, which is why he says the denarius you earned is yours, go your way. I won't tell you how to spend it. Now, obviously this guy's been pretty successful with his money because he just hired like everybody in the town square to come work for him. Okay? He could probably tell them what to do with their money and he might give some really good advice. Alright? But he says, go do whatever you want to with your money. Feed your family. Buy a camel. I don't know. Do whatever you want. It's your money. But I get to do what I want with my money. I won't tell you how to handle yours. You don't tell me how to handle mine. That is a concept that does exist in society called private property. Okay? What you own belongs to you, and what I own belongs to me. And you may ask my advice what to do with yours or vice versa, and I may like or not like what you do with yours. You may like or not like what I do with mine. But I get to do what I want with my own things. Now, can I choose well or poorly with my own things? Yeah, I mean, I could be stupid with my own things. Could also be really good with my own things. But they're still my own things. And so what this guy says here, is it not lawful for me to do whatever I wish with my own things? And I love the last sentence of this. This is, to me, this is the hardest pushback against the idea that, well, rich people are all bad. Okay? Who's the wealthier person in this picture? The landowner or the worker?
Landowner.
What does the landowner say to the worker at the end of verse 15?
Or are you envious because I am generous?
Are you envious because I am generous? Okay? What did he do for that last worker?
Paid him the same.
He gave him the same thing. He gave him, frankly, more than he probably had earned. He gave him what he thought was right. This guy came and worked. It was only an hour, but he worked. I'm going to give him the same thing. Why are you envious? I've got an older school translation here. Mine says, why is your eye evil? Okay? What it's trying to convey here, and the verbiage isn't exactly the same, but give me this much leeway, is a certain level of covetousness. What is covetousness?
Wanting what's not yours.
Wanting what's not yours. It's a little further. It's not just, do you walk through the store and want things that are on the shelf? Do they belong to you? Not until you pay for them, right? Does that make you covetous? Some of you guys want a car one day, right? When you drive past the car lot, you go, oh, that red one's really nice. It's convertible, goes real fast, whatever. Is that covetousness?
No.
What's covetousness?
Wanting you to have it and not somebody else.
Me wanting it at someone else's expense. I can't believe that person has that car. They don't deserve it. Why can't I have things like that? That's not fair. I mean, it's wanting with some whining, isn't it? Right? Yeah, I mean, it's they don't deserve it, I do. Somebody else has it, and because of that, I get jealous about it, and I say they don't deserve it. I get real judgy with how somebody else has their things. And so what the master says to this worker is, are you jealous because I'm generous? Are you evil because I'm good? Are you covetous because I give? Right? And so here he says, I can do whatever I want with my own stuff, and don't you make yourself bad because I'm good. And what he's saying is, it's not my fault that I paid everybody the same. You got exactly what you agreed to. Go your way. That's a concept that is few and far between today. Okay? The idea that I work for what I agreed for and I don't complain. You get what you get and you don't throw a fit. You guys heard that before, maybe? Right? Don't complain that someone else has more than you. Maybe they worked harder, maybe they got lucky. Regardless, it's their stuff, not yours. Don't let your eye be evil because someone else is good. Okay? Now, yes, ma'am.
Is negotiating for better wages bad then?
No, why would that be bad?
Well, because you said you agreed to work for what you agreed to work for,
Mhm.
and complaining about it is,
So, but what I'm saying is you go back in and say, I would like a raise, and they say no. You have two options now.
okay,
What are the two options?
take it or leave it.
Take it or leave it. Quit and go find somewhere else that pays better, or continue working here and prove why you're worth more. That's your choices, right? And some people, sure, they get stuck in dead-end jobs where they're never going to get a raise. I mean, you are never going to be a millionaire flipping burgers at McDonald's, no matter how hard you try. Okay? However, everybody in this story worked for what they agreed to. Some of them actually took a risk in him saying, I'll pay you what's right. What could he have paid the guys that only worked 1 hour?
A little bit.
Very, very little, right? You know, if we assume a 12-hour workday, 1/12 of what the first group got. Yeah, but he didn't. Okay? This is a good landowner, and specifically in Darian's version, it says, I'm generous. In mine, it says, I'm good. Okay? So, I'm not saying you can't go say, hey, I really think I'm worth more than this. Let's talk about it. I would actually encourage employees to do that. My employees do that. So, yeah, when they think they're worth more, make your case. I can agree or disagree. And the other thing you have to realize is the landowner knows he knows what that labor is worth to him. When he agrees to pay you, he's saying, this is what it's worth to me. Remember we talked about time is money? That was our big thing for this course, all right? Or this section of this course. He's saying, your time is worth this much to me. You may disagree. You may be able to find somebody that values your time as highly as you do. But if you spend all day making mud pies, I can promise you, you'll still be broke because nobody wants them. Okay? Not every job is worth the same thing. Anything else on that? Then I want to shift gears a little bit, okay? We went through all these different sections on money. This is the start to what would have been today's class. I wanted to rehash the workers in the vineyard because I think there's some points there that need to be made that don't often get made. The second part, or this next to last point, is the trap of money. All right, and so we talked about this phrase, where's the wrong here? Money is the root of all evil. The love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Okay? Now, what does that mean?
You cannot serve two masters.
It means
Talk louder. I don't have much of a voice.
you can't serve two masters. Money
Okay.
is the thing. Money is the thing behind the different kinds of evil that people commit,
Okay.
and they're like lust for it.
Okay, so lust for money, pursuit of, let's take money and expand it a little bit and say wealth or riches or what have you. Why do people covet?
Because they want it.
Because they want something that someone else has. Why do people steal?
Because they want something someone else has.
Why do people murder?
Well, kind of, because they want someone.
They may want something that someone else has, but also,
They might.
I'm more valuable than you.
Oh, that's it.
My life is more valuable than yours. My desires are more valuable than yours. See how that still ties itself to a certain level of lust and placing. Again, time is money. Okay? Your time here on this earth is worth nothing to me, therefore your life is worth nothing to me. See how murder becomes a love of money kind of thing? Guys, what I want you to understand is what Paul writes, and he writes that in 1 Timothy chapter 6, is he talks about how the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. And what he says before that is you need to be content with what you have. Now, content is not complacent. What does content mean? What's that word mean? Starts with an S.
Satisfied.
Satisfied. Is it okay to be satisfied?
Yes.
Okay. What's the difference between content and complacent?
Complacent's like a laziness.
It's kind of lazy factor, doesn't it? We use those words differently. Contentment is, this is what I have and I'm okay with that. And complacency is, this is what I have and it'll never get better. See the difference in the mentality here? I can be content with what I have and continue striving for more, but if I'm complacent with what I have, why strive for more? Y'all understand kind of the difference in those words? And so, being content with what you have is good. Godliness with contentment is great gain. Bless you. But being complacent with what you have, just saying, well, this is all I've got and there's just no reason working hard. Remember we said we work hard because why?
You don't spend forever here.
Well, one, the physical sense is because our days are numbered. And then what's the other reason? Why do we work hard?
God bless.
Because God told us to. Okay? Contentment is, I am okay with such things as I have. As long as I can live a godly life and do the things that God has asked me to do, I am content with that. But I'm not complacent. I'm not just going to kick back. Like, keep in mind, the rich fool was complacent. I have all I'll ever need. I'll build bigger barns. That's complacency. Okay? Complacency is just as much a risk for the rich as it is for the poor. So, the idea of, I'm not saying you need to pursue because you can never have enough. I'm saying if you continue to pursue, that is not necessarily wrong unless it causes you to do wrong things. Okay? Godliness with contentment is great gain, but godliness with complacency is a very, very great danger. Okay? Next thing. In that same passage, I've got a question for you. And it's a shame Louise is not here for this question. She would like this question. Who loves money more? The person who has it and doesn't serve it, or the person who serves it and doesn't have it? Who loves the money more? Who loves the money more? The person that has it and doesn't serve it, or the person who serves it and doesn't have it? Anybody?
The first one.
One. Okay, why the first one? He has money, but he doesn't serve money. Does he love money more?
Question.
Yes.
What kind of love are we talking about? Are we talking about appreciation that
Well,
we understand what it's worth and we like it and we
Okay.
know? Or this is the most wonderful thing in the world and, you know?
So we're thinking
What-
love of money in the same way he talks about in 1 Timothy 6. The love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. So who loves their money? The person who has it and doesn't serve it, or the person who serves it and doesn't have it?
The person who serves it and doesn't have it.
Okay, so I've got one answer for each side. Here's the question. I'll repeat it for you. Who loves money? The person who has it and doesn't serve it, or the person who serves it and doesn't have it? Okay, I've got one for each side. The person who has it and doesn't serve it. We're saying he's wealthy, but he doesn't love his money.
Oh, I thought we were saying he didn't give out his money.
No, he doesn't
He doesn't
serve it.
serve
Not
it.
serve it like, not like a waiter.
Oh,
Serve it like a servant.
okay, that makes more
Yeah.
sense. I was gonna say they're opposites.
I was trying to figure out, I felt like this was an easy question. When I wrote it, I was like, it lays out well. It's not too hard, but thanks for making me, I'll go back and read
That's
the
the
question.
English language for you.
Yeah. But he doesn't serve his money in the sense that he's not constantly in pursuit of it. He's not constantly bowing down to it. It is not the object of his worship or desire. That kind of serve.
But that makes sense.
That makes more sense, right? So, when we say the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, we often look at rich people and go, you love your money too much.
No.
Okay? Neglecting the fact that most people pointing those fingers are going, you love your money too much, you should give it to me. Okay? You understand the idea of the person who has it and doesn't serve it versus serves it and doesn't have it?
No.
Okay? It is just as possible to love money even when you don't have it. To serve money even when you don't have it. I really get irritated with this, and I don't think it's necessarily a modern idea, but this just notion that rich people must have done something dishonest. That's how they got rich. Okay? That's not necessarily the case. Sure, there's some that are. Okay? There are crooks in the world. Sorry, it's just how it works. Okay? At the same time, the idea that somehow poor is righteous and rich is unrighteous is just nonsense. Okay? There were wealthy people in Scripture who were still righteous. Okay? It at least appears that John the Apostle's family was well connected and fairly well off. Okay? So, the reason I say this is for you to understand that loving money isn't just about having it. It's about pursuing it. And for a lot of people, that pursuit, even though they never catch it, becomes their love. Does that make sense? Everybody follow me there? All right. There's one other thing that we need to address, and that's Proverbs 22, verse 7. The borrower is slave to the lender. Okay? Proverbs 22, verse 7. Now, borrower is a slave to the lender.
On the page.
Now, here's my question. What does that mean?
If you're in debt, I guess.
Okay, so debt. What does it mean, though? You got debt, so
You're gonna have to.
don't forget this thing down here.
Well, the borrower needs money.
The borrower needs money.
The lender has money.
The lender has money.
So the
Okay.
borrower would do anything to get the money from the lender.
Okay, so this guy has money. This guy does not have money. He wants to get this guy's money. What does he exchange for it?
Time.
Time. Now, here's my question. Is the borrower slave to the lender?
Yeah.
How so?
In a
It
way.
depends on how you
In a
define
way.
slave.
Okay, what does slave mean?
He
Is
also
it him giving his time? Because if it's him giving his money, then the lender is a slave to the borrower.
Okay, so you're thinking about, well, this guy gave him money. Who has control in this relationship?
Probably
The lender. Who sets the terms?
the lender.
Okay? Unlike the working relationship where they agreed to it, the lender just says, here's the money that you can have it or not have it at this rate. Okay? Now, we'll get off into Old Testament things about this, but back in the day, they used this phrase. Y'all seen this before, right? Bond servant. What does that mean? Y'all have probably always looked at the word bond as in bound, like tied up, right? What does bond servant mean?
He owes him. It's the servant who's in debt. He's working because he owes money.
It's a debt. You know the word that we use, I work in finance, you know the word we use for loans? Bond. Today, when a company issues a loan, we still call it a bond. So the idea of being a bond servant still exists. Okay? Now, bond servant or debt servant, does that make a borrower slave to a lender?
Yes.
They're exchanging their time, paying off that debt. Now, today, we do it differently. You know, back then, it was like, all right, you need this money to eat or whatever else. I mean, you got an option. You can beg, you can steal, or you can work if you find yourself on hard straits. And so they would sign themselves up. Borrower would go to the lender and exchange so many years of service in exchange for money or shelter or food or whatever else. And they'd go and they'd pledge their lands or whatever else. In the Old Testament, and I don't have time to go through all the different scriptures that talk about this, but every 50th year, you had to forgive all of the debts in Israel. So, Lane and I are both Jews. Lane loans me money. Okay? He has to forgive that debt in the 50th year, and it's called the year of Jubilee. At that year, everybody's debts were forgiven. So, when you figured out how much money it was worth, or how much money you would loan me, you would count how many years until the next Jubilee. And how many years were left? You'd value my years, my days of labor for that many years, and that's how much it was worth. That was the measure of my debt. And so they still looked at debts as, here's how many years of your life you're going to work for me in exchange for what I'm giving you now. This is what it's worth. That's the exchange. Okay? Now, back then it was how many years till Jubilee. Now we don't do that because we don't forgive debts every 50 years. Instead, we have a certain amount of time at a certain rate or interest, and we call that a loan. There's a couple of kinds of loans. This is not a finance class. This is just a discussion about how finances work in Scripture. And so there's collateralized and signatory loans. Collateralized loans have something against them. House, car, motorcycle, camper. Something you can touch is collateral. If you don't have that, if you have a credit card or what's called a signatory loan, what you are putting on the line is your name. You are the collateral of the loan. They're not going to throw you in jail, normally. But what they are going to do is require you to pay it off over however much time was agreed upon. Okay? You are exchanging your time for that thing. So, in the concept of is borrower slave to the lender, yes, that is true. It is not necessarily wrong, it's just true. When you agree to buy a car or a house or whatever else and you're paying off that loan, you need to know the time that's being exchanged for it. Some of you would be staggered to realize how much it actually costs to buy something that you borrow for. Like, when you think about, like, well, buying a house is really, really cheap because I'm going to pay this little bitty bit for 30 years. You'll wind up paying double what that house costs when you figure in the interest over that amount of time. Sometimes more. But you don't think about it because you pay it off in little bitty pieces over 30 years. But you are pledging to pay a certain amount of money, a certain amount of your time for 30 years. I think there's only 3 of us in this room that are even 30 years old right now. So when you think about a 30-year loan that's longer than every one of you has been alive, is how long most people pay on the house they live in. That's a long time, okay? So you are a bond servant or a slave to a lender for that long. Now, it doesn't mean you don't make extra money and you spend it on whatever you want. It's just saying that this part of your money is dedicated to that until it's paid off. Okay? So, what did it mean to be a bond servant? We covered that. We talked about signatory loans. We talked about Old Testament debt requirements. One interesting thing there, as I mentioned, every 50th year they had to forgive the debts. That only existed for Israelites. If you gave loan to somebody outside of Israel, you did not have to forgive them in year number 50. Okay? You could keep them in debt for as long as you wanted. If you had a slave that was outside the land of Israel, you could keep them forever. Okay? So this was the rule within God's people. A couple other things, they didn't allow you to charge interest on the poor. That was not permitted. They didn't allow you to say, well, it's only a few years until Jubilee, so I won't loan my money. God says in the Mosaic law that if you do that, you are behaving evilly. Your eye is evil. And the reason he said that is because everything in Israel belongs to me. And if you are not generous with those things, you have done evil. Kind of gives you a better understanding of why the rich fool was condemned for building bigger barns and holding all of his stuff. Okay? Last thing, and then we're done with the money thing. We'll shift gears to the minor matters stuff. Ownership of money. Who owns money?
God.
God. Okay. Let me challenge that just a 1 second if I can. Go to Matthew 22. What's in Matthew 22? You guys are going to want to go to verse about 15.
Tax to Caesar.
Taxes to Caesar. Now, how many of y'all know this story? A few of you. All right, let's read through it real quick. All right. Verse 15, the Pharisees went and plotted how they might entangle him in his talk. They sent to him their disciples, Teacher, we know that you are true and teach the way of God in truth, nor do you care about anyone, for you do not regard the person of men. Tell us, therefore, what do you think? Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar? Jesus perceived their wickedness and said, why do you test me, you hypocrites? Starting in verse 19, Darian.
Show me the coin that is used for paying the tax.
All right, so we're going to show me the money, right? Verse 20, JT.
And Jesus said to them, whose likeness and inscription is this?
Mike?
Caesar's, they replied. Then he said to them, so give back to Caesar what is Caesar's, and give to God what is God's.
Okay. So, who owns money?
Caesar.
What country are you in?
The world.
Into this.
Whose image and inscription is on it?
Caesar.
Caesar's. Government. Now, the immediate clapback to that is who owns government, or who gave government power and authority and whatever else. Why do we submit to government? Because of God. So, again, I know you and I have this back and forth thing about in a world without God, right? I know we have that ongoing thing there. Think about it this way. Money belongs to the government because Jesus was asked, is it right to pay taxes? And he said, whose inscription and seal is on the money? And he actually said, this is Caesar's money, give it to him. If he demands part of it back, give it to him. Okay? That's understanding that money belongs to government. But again, what's our overarching concept here? So, does that mean that government owns you? No. Why not? Because he didn't put a period there, right? Therefore, give to Caesar what is Caesar's.
You give to God what is God's.
Oh, wait, there was more. So, God owns something in this equation, too.
He owns our time.
He owns our time.
He owns us.
But what was the test of whether or not something belonged to Caesar?
His image.
His image?
So we are made in God's likeness.
Keep going, though. His image
And likeness.
and likeness. What is likeness?
Similarities?
It should have something like inscription there, right?
Yeah.
It is our, and I don't carry cash money. Does anybody have $1 in their pocket?
Probably.
20.
I need a $1 bill, 20 bill. It doesn't matter. Just the green paper money. Quick, run, hurry.
Like in the back, so.
All right, yeah. All right. So
What?
there's a picture on this, right? There's a lot of pictures on it, as a matter of fact. Okay. And then there's an inscription on it. A lot of inscriptions, as a matter of fact, right? United States of America, Federal Reserve Note. Oh, look, there again. United States of America. Who does this belong to?
The government.
The government, okay? It's got a picture of the White House on it. It's got the picture of a dead president on it. It's got an eagle, a couple of eagles. There's an olive branch in here, too. It's got a seal, the Department of the Treasury. So it's pretty clear who this belongs to, right? They wrote themselves all over it. Okay? We agree on that part? Genesis 1, God said that we're going to create man in our image. So whose image is on man? It's God's. Kind of like the government's image is on this money. Okay? And the government's inscriptions all over this. What did God say that he would do with the people of his covenant? What would he put in their hearts?
His commandments.
His commands. His words. I'll write my word on their hearts. I'll write my law on their hearts. And so, there's an inscription and image on us also, right? So when Jesus says to give Caesar what's Caesar's, you give him everything that has his image and likeness or image and inscription on it. Whereas you give to God everything that has his image and inscription and likeness on it. Does that make sense? Right? So, when it comes to the money, the government owns the money and they tell you this is your taxes. It is wrong to cheat. It is wrong to not pay them. Because Jesus advocated for that. Now, it is not wrong to look at the rules and go, this is the amount that I have to pay, and I don't have to pay any more. Okay? When he said, render to Caesar what is Caesar, Caesar didn't ask for all of your money, usually. But you did have to give him what he asked for. So, I spent a lot of my time helping people figure out how to manage what they render to Caesar today. Okay? They pay exactly what they should, and no more, and no less. Okay? The other part of this is understanding that because God's image is on us and because God's inscription is on us, God owns us. And so when we consider what we ought to do with our money, yes, we pay the taxes because that belongs to them, but also the other things that we do with our money and with our time matter to God. And if we don't treat those things in a godly manner, we are failing in our fellowship or discipleship of God. Did everybody follow me that far? The last thing, you can direct money to anything that you want while it is under your stewardship, provided it does not defy Scripture. Okay? And you can look at, if you wanted to go and look at like Galatians chapter 5, there's some other stuff that we'll talk about in the minor matters part of this class between that this week and next. But you have stewardship over the money that you have, and you can handle it well or poorly. What you choose to spend it on, how you choose to earn it, how you choose to invest it, all of that matters. There are right and wrong ways to do those things. There are smart and foolish ways to do those things. But it's entirely up to you. Just like the landowner in that parable, you can do whatever you want with your own things. But you will be judged for what you do with those things. Does that all make sense? So the big encapsulating thing I want y'all to take out of this class, this part of this class about faithful finances, is that every time you think about money, you are selling a piece of your time or giving away or borrowing a piece of your time. And it needs to be worth what you're exchanging it for. Furthermore, what you're exchanging it for, you are dedicating a part of your life to. Is that something that God would permit or want you to dedicate a part of your life to? Does everybody follow me there? Okay. We're going to shift gears. We only got about 10 minutes left. So, we're going to shift gears to minor matters. Now, I want you guys to go to, since we're in Matthew 22, this is really convenient, go to Matthew 23. There are 3 principles we're going to use in discussing what are minor matters. Okay? The first, principle number 1. Is that Scripture is true. Now, I understand in the class where we're talking about reasoning things and logicking our way through things that this is not always a given for people. For the sake of this class, we are going to use this principle because in discussing what is major and what is minor, we can't discuss spiritual matters about what is important and what's not without acknowledging this one thing. So this is the one time where, Louisa, I will not ask you to consider a world where there's no God. Okay? Principle 1, Scripture is true. Principle 2, Scripture has a purpose. It's not just there. There's a reason that we have it. Everything in Scripture is written for a reason. And number 3, it does not contradict itself. Okay? Now, the reason that this is important is it will not give you two commands where to carry them both out would be impossible. So, here's the question. If Scripture is true, if it serves a purpose and it doesn't contradict, how do we know which things are more important than others?
Do you mean which things in the Bible or
Mhm.
which? Okay.
Specifically scriptural things. How do we know which things are more important than others?
Because
Is there an importance level?
I feel like to a degree there is, because
When we read Matthew 23, you're going to know for sure there is.
Old Testament law doesn't matter to us as well. It doesn't matter to us, period, as it does New Testament law.
Mhm.
Like Old Testament law, we're not going out and giving sacrifices and doing everything in the Mosaic
Mhm.
law, but we're living everything out in the New Testament.
But I'm saying of the things that matter,
Oh,
how do we know which ones are most important and which ones are less important?
By priority, right?
By priorities. Okay? Some things are minors.
Well,
Right. So, would it help if we read through this passage a little bit? Let's go to Matthew 23. Matthew 23 at the beginning. Now, keep in mind, the end of Matthew 22, there's a change that occurs here. Matthew 22, verse 46 says, "No one was able to answer him," here talking about Jesus, "a word, not from that day on did anyone dare question him anymore." All right? So, we're done questioning Jesus. Now Jesus is through with the ministry portion of his life. And so in chapter 23, verse 1, he spoke to the multitudes and his disciples, saying, Megan, did you read yet?
No.
All right, start Matthew 23, verse 2.
The teachers of the law and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat.
Verse 3.
Therefore, whatever they tell you to observe and do, but do not do according to their works, for they say and do not do.
Okay, so follow their teaching, but not their behavior. What do we call a person that says one thing and does another?
hypocrite.
Hypocrite. Alright, follow their words, but not their lives, because they're hypocrites, okay? Verse 4.
They tie up heavy burdens hard to bear and lay them on people's shoulders, but they themselves are not willing to move them with their fingers.
Alright, so they have these heavy burdens. What are they talking about with these heavy burdens?
The command.
Strictness of the
Commands, strictness of the law. But he says, don't do what they say and not what they do. So don't be like them, because they tie up these heavy burdens and do not help people move them. So they give people the commands, but not what?
The example.
The example, or the instruction and ability to follow them. Okay? Next verse, verse 5.
Everything they do is done for people to see. They make their phylacteries
Mm-hmm.
wide and the tassels on their garments long.
Verse 6.
They love the best places of feasts, the best seats in the synagogues.
7.
And respectful greetings in the marketplaces, and being called rabbi by men. But do not be called rabbi, for one is your teacher, and you are all brothers.
Okay.
Do not,
Pause there. No, you're good. So, they do all these things to be seen. Listen to what they do, but don't do what they do. And so what does he say they do?
They make
Well,
all their
They're hypocrites, but they are all for show.
draw attention to themselves.
Correct. When they do something, everybody knows about it because they make sure everybody knows about it. So don't be like them, but do what they say. What is he drawing a distinction between? It's not what they do, it's why they do it. Does that make sense? Okay? Follow what they're saying, but don't do it like them. Because it's not what they're doing that's a problem. It's why they do it that's a problem. It's the way they execute it. Maybe I could throw in why and how. It's not wrong that they give, it's just that they need everybody to see them giving. It's not wrong that they teach, they just need everybody to see them teaching. It's not wrong that they know things, they just need everybody to know that they know things. Okay? So he says, you follow what they teach, but not what they do or how they do it. Alright? So, there's a hierarchy here that's put in place of follow what they teach, but not what they do. And then he goes on, starting in verse 9, do not call anyone on earth your father. Verse 8. But you do not be called rabbi, for one is your teacher, the Christ. You are all brethren. Verse 9, do not call anyone on earth your father, for one is your Father who is in heaven. And do not be called teacher, for one is your teacher, the Christ. But he who is greatest among you shall be your servant. And whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. It's a hierarchy of servitude. If you want to be the top, serve. If you want to be the most approved, serve. Shoot for the bottom, you'll wind up at the top. He's talking about the way that God rewards their behavior. So, in what things are minor, the first thing that he says, it's not their teaching that's unimportant, it's the way that they do it. Now, he's going to now pronounce a repeated list of woes on the Pharisees. We're going to cover the first one today and the rest next week. Okay? First one, verse 13. Darian. Matthew 23, verse 13.
Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You shut the door of the kingdom of heaven in people's faces. You yourselves do not enter, nor will you let those enter who are trying to.
All right. The first woe is you teach people to go where you're going. And where you're going is not heaven. What is he trying to say?
You're missing the point.
You're missing the point. You're not leading people where you think you are. Okay? Verse 14. Lane, do 14 for me, please.
I don't have 14.
You don't have verse 14?
It should be at the bottom.
Oh.
You should have like a...
Okay, give me the
It's
footnote.
like
That's fine.
15.
Blake, do 14.
Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you devour widows' houses, even while for a pretense you make long prayers.
Wait, you're 14, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Therefore you shall receive greater condemnation.
Okay, two things I want to take out of that. You devour widows' houses and for pretense make long prayers. Okay? What he is trying to point to is the fact that they are not dealing honestly with people, they're not doing generously or mercifully with people. They are all show, but when it comes time to actually execute in a godly manner, they don't do it. So, they have great power and authority, do they not?
Mm-hmm.
What are they doing with that power and authority?
Who's abusing?
Abusing it, okay? They devour these houses and make these long prayers and whatever else. They make it all about them. But the other thing is that everyone that follows where they are leading is headed where?
To a greater condemnation.
To a greater condemnation. Now, condemnation. What's condemnation?
Could it be the same condemnation that's found in Mark 16:16? Because if
Probably.
it is, then that's hell.
Okay, so that's the ultimate result of the condemnation. But what does the word condemnation mean? Judgment, okay? Judgment leading itself toward what?
Punishment.
Punishment. Now, using your example of hell, are there parts of hell that just like burn hotter than others?
No.
Or is everybody thrown into hell together? So what does he mean by you'll receive greater condemnation? How are we going to get greater condemnation? We talked about whether or not we can prioritize bigger and small things. We'll get to that about the fourth or fifth woe. Okay? But here at the very beginning, you're going to receive greater condemnation. You're going to receive greater judgment and therefore greater punishment. What is he giving them judgment for?
Leading others,
Leading others. Not just what you did,
but who you did it to.
but who you did it in front of, who followed you. So he says, you do these things. You devour widows' houses, you make these long prayers all for show, but the first part of that, verse 13, was, you are leading people astray. Therefore, because you lead people astray, and because you misuse your power, you will be more strictly judged, more harshly judged. Which is why in Scripture it talks about, don't everybody run to be a teacher, knowing that we'll receive a stricter judgment. Right?
Mm-hmm.
You're judged not only for what you did, but what you taught and who you led in doing it. Okay? So the first part of this is, I really can't find a better example of this than the Spider-Man quote, with great power comes great responsibility. Okay? If you misuse your responsibility and power, God notices, and it matters. Okay? So the first minor matter is not just whether or not you have or don't have authority, but it's how you use the authority that you have. Okay? That seems small. By becoming Pharisees, they've already proven themselves to be the top of the top, the best of the best, the most knowledgeable, the greatest teachers. But how they use their power is going to cause them not to actually be more highly exalted or regarded by God, but actually more strictly judged and more severely punished. So it matters not only that you obtain the power, but how you use it. That's minor matter number 1. All right, we'll pick up the rest next week. Thank you guys for listening.
Thank you for teaching.
Mm-hmm.